Okay. Yes, this is the third installment of Thomas Aquinas. Again, the format will be I'll do a presentation, and then there's two questions that I'll give you for the discussion group. Last time we kind of concluded the arguments, the 5 ways Thomas Aquinas, a very basic, kind of understanding of his approach to constituting a proof for the existence of God. And so basically, what I want to do now is I had introduced this last week. St. Thomas thought we can know about God in 2 ways, 2 basic ways. By reason, okay, which is what we're doing here, okay? We're using our logic, our reason, and so also by grace. The 2 really need to be working together, okay? Reason and grace. Now, we believe that the Catholic Church is a very reasonable religion. It's very reasonable. Think of all the great thinkers, that have come to us down through the centuries, from the early fathers, all the councils, all the theological, dogmatic doctrine battles that have been waged against the world, the flesh, and the devil, and especially Satan's trying to undo everything that God tries to do, and well, you know what all that's about. Okay, so now, taking that into account, it is inappropriate to talk, as some contemporary philosophers of religion do, about a universe in which God exists. Inappropriate. It's not true. Not what we believe in terms of Thomas Aquinas, in terms of the Catholic Church, coming out of these great intellectuals of the centuries, okay? A universe in which God exists. That's an error. That is not true. As though God were an item among other items in the universe, and not greater than the whole universe. That's the point. Greater than the whole universe. God cannot be an item in the universe, as it all comes from him. And in the beauty of the Old Testament, a lot of people don't like the Old Testament because they say it's old. For those of us who are elder, especially Ave Maria, they're old, very wise people. Okay, but anyway, okay. I am who am. That's what Moses was to say, who that entity that was in the burning bush is. I am who am. The magnificence of that, the prophetic nature of that, I am who am. I am. And so it comes down to I am whether you believe me or not. That's the beauty of it. I am he who is. Now that's beyond the universe. That's what we're talking about in the concept of infinity. Forever. That we can conceive of that, even as a concept. Infinity, forever. Ever and ever and ever and ever. Okay? And so that's a very important point to come to realize. God created the universe. He's not an item within it, like us little earthlings. We're in the universe. Okay? And so this is where we get into the mysterium tremendum, the tremendous mystery. That's what we're dealing with here. And it's just magnificent. Okay, so now, taking that into account, I'm going to do a comparison here. I think it's an appropriate time to do a comparison. The great intellectuals of all time. Okay. Thomas Aquinas, for us as Catholics, of course, was a tremendous intellect. Okay. And I'm going to introduce another tremendous intellect, where these 2 men are almost the same, except in one interesting way. Okay, now, science. Remember that song? Science. I forget what it's called. I remember it goes like, science. Never mind. Science. Okay? It's just music. Okay, science. Science seeks after events. Like, say, for example, the Big Bang. Okay? This is popular recently. I don't know how recently it became popular. Okay? The Big Bang. Then everything came from the Big Bang, just banged on out there. Here we are, part of the Big Bang. And then somebody said there's going to be the Big Shrink. You know, scientists, physicists come up with all these kinds of interesting things, which can't be proven, but it's interesting speculation based on their logic, or as they see logic. Okay, science seeks after events and objects and phenomena within the empirically observable and measurable universe. While philosophy, this is where we get to the rub, so to speak. While philosophy and religion seek after ultimate and final causes. Ultimate and final causes. There's a distinct difference, doesn't have to be, but there's a distinct difference between the approach in terms of science and philosophy and religion. And this is where I'm going to get into the comparison of these two monumental men who never knew each other. Okay? And so this is the whole thing about, religion and philosophy, science. Basically, Thomas Aquinas provided an inroad in the cooperation and in the compliance between, faith and reason. In other words, he created an avenue, for science, and not having science as being an enemy, say, for example, to religion and philosophy. Okay, so taking that into account, this is what we have in terms of our understanding of science, religion, philosophy. I mean, in college, you go to college, okay, where you take physics, you take astronomy, you take chemistry, and what's that, biology, and then what do you take? English. Philosophy, and then, as what they tried to do in the public schools when I was way back, in the English department, I don't know why they did this, was kind of, because I didn't go to Catholic high school. Thank God I went to Catholic grade school, but I didn't go to Catholic high school. They introduced this thing, the Bible as literature. It didn't go over very well. And I didn't have enough religious sense to know that when they said that the text we're going to use was the King James Bible, it was like, well, whatever, man. I just want to get a grade and graduate. That's how we were. That's all I was in those days. Okay, there's another arena of isms. Okay? Scientism. Scientism. Okay, let me give you a definition of this. The tendency to reduce all legitimate knowledge to the scientific form of knowledge. Scientific form of knowledge. If science cannot prove it, it is not real. There you go. For example, and here I'm going to introduce the other guy. We know Thomas Aquinas. Here's the other guy. Very interesting man. The man was a genius. The man was an absolute genius. God bless him. Stephen Hawking, 2012. Stephen Hawking, in his book, The Grand Design. Interesting book. How many here read the book, The Grand Design? Read parts of it, but anyway. The Grand Design argued that the universe requires no creator. That was a defining principle that he was operating on. A genius, of course, man that's contributed a lot to physics, the science of physics. The universe requires no creator because there's a law such as gravity. The universe can and will create itself from nothing. Wow. Bang! You got the Big Bang. I guess it has something to do with the Big Bang. The universe just spontaneously creates itself out of nothing. He's operating out of that principle. Okay? Two men, Thomas Aquinas, Stephen Hawking, geniuses. Now, they had something in common. Something in common. I'll tell you what that is. What they had in common. Remember this? Remember this? The reasonable mind, the emotional mind. The unification coming together in the wise mind. Remember when we did rescued? We had that whole thing about created, captured, rescued, and our response. And then we have Aquinas' 5 ways: motion, cause, being, gradation, and design. Okay? Both of those men were very much, not completely exclusively, in the reasonable mind. That's what they had in common. That's what they had together as a comparison in their likeness to each other. Okay? Both of them. The way I'm going to describe this, I have to kind of define this. Both men had what we call a low affect. They were not very emotional men. Thomas Aquinas was not an emotional man. Stephen Hawking was not an emotional man. Some people more emotional than others. Some people more intellectual than others. And I've met both kinds.
Do you really think that Hawking was a philosopher?
A philosopher?
I don't think so.
So he wasn't a philosopher?
He was not.
No, he was not. He was not. Right, okay. Yeah, no, absolutely not. Hawking was not a philosopher. And I think the thing is that when you think about the use of human reason, okay, and not being an emotional kind of outpouring, like say, for example, rescue, there was a lot of emotional content to that, and that's good. That's good, because a lot of people get really kind of into a quandary or a crisis because of emotions, right? Because they can either work for us or work against us. But so can reason work for us or against us too. Okay, so basically, if you want to compare, Stephen Hawking and Thomas Aquinas, it basically comes down to this: the fundamental option. It's a fundamental option. The fundamental option is you either believe in God or you don't. That's a fundamental option that every human being faces. Okay? So when you think about Thomas Aquinas, because he was a man of faith, because by the grace of God also, and accepting that grace, he went about going through the intellectual challenges or endeavors to at least prove that there was a deity, at least prove that there was a God. Whether, and so it was, like say, for example, I'll mention this a little bit because it kind of relates. Some of the early founding fathers were deists. They believed in God, but they said he has absolutely nothing to do with us now. He created us, gave us a mind, gave us intelligence, and then he basically said, look, you're on your own. You swim or sink on your own. I've given you knowledge and intellect. I've given you the ability to survive. I've done that for you. Now I'm just going to step back, and it's of your own free will whether you survive or not. That's deism. But he believed in God. Okay, but there's no intervention. That's one aspect. Okay, so that's a fundamental option. They chose to believe in God. Okay, now, the thing about this fundamental option, okay, is that Thomas Aquinas believed that everything hinged on a belief in God. Okay, Stephen Hawking, in terms of my estimation of him and what I know and read, okay, basically was saying this: it doesn't matter to him whether there's a God or not, because it doesn't have anything to do with what he's about. And that's honesty. I'm not criticizing the man. I'm just not. But it's something that we can see. In the fundamental option, he says, look, that's in philosophy and religion. That's not his forte, right? He basically said that was not something that he was either interested in or whatever. So he basically, in terms of the fundamental option, decided that he said, look, I really don't think there's a God, because I think that there can be, a creation without a God. Okay. And of course, in some ways that can be described as the quandary or the conflict in the modern world. because we have to acknowledge, okay, that Thomas Aquinas was before the so-called Enlightenment, okay, and Stephen Hawking is post-Enlightenment, okay, so we got the whole, bunch of philosophies and things that were coming to fruition through the development of historical events, scientific discoveries, all kinds of scripture, scholarship, you got all this stuff that somebody's got to sort through all that. And I tried to do it. And many of us try to do that. Okay, so now, I think what I'm going to do now, because I'm running out of time, I'm going to give you these questions that to deal with in the groups, okay? And basically, this is what it is, the questions, okay? And feel free to contest some of this, in the sense that I'm looking at this from the research that I've done, but there may be, another aspect to this that I don't know about or whatever. But anyway, one way or the other. Now, the first 4 questions that we already dealt with, okay? The first one was, did you ever doubt the existence of God, and why? If you never doubted the existence of God, why? Okay. Did you ever know an atheist? Why do some people not believe in God? Okay. Now these are the next 2 questions. The next 2 questions are this. How much religious education have you had? How much religious education have you had? The second question is, how much science have you studied? How much science have you had? And so we see the 2 different areas here in terms of the discussions that we're going to have in our small groups. So anyway, that's the presentation for today. And I'm going to get in next time into a further examination of what Thomas Aquinas believed was true and that which was error, to see how he's progressing this out. Eventually, as I'm going to talk next week, the different categories of the Summa Theologica, something that goes on further beyond just the creation, understanding. We get into, the church, you get into, theology, dogma, doctrine, the sacraments, so on and so forth. Okay, I think we're out of time, are we not?
We are out of time.
Have a wonderful week.
Thank you, Father.
You're welcome.